Hello and welcome to This Week Back in the Day. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about Niall Quinn's testimonial on the 14th of May, 2002. I'm Dave, your host, joined as always by Martin. Martin, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Dave. Looking forward to covering this one. St. Niall is a hero for Irish football fans, and yeah, it's an interesting one to chat about. And it probably sets the tone. Spoiler alert for what is going to kick off in the next few weeks after this.
Yeah, just a tad. We're going to go through. Obviously, it's just a one-off game. We're going to try and go through all the interesting nitty-gritty facts. Just to let you know, Martin, I do have the program here just next to me. You can hear that there. So we're going to have a little look through that. And why is the program so important? Don't worry, Martin. We'll get to that in just a second. Niall Quinn, who's playing for Sunderland at the time, decided to have a match against his country at his home stadium in the Stadium of Light. Now, testimonials are normally, for those of you younger fans, who are only used to players who are on 5 million quid a week and that sort of stuff. A testimonial was basically for a 10-year service of a player to a club and sometimes a country, and they would pretty much get the gate receipts of their game, but they would have to organize it. But it was sort of like a golden handshake, that kind of thing, and it would just make sure that they weren't hard up after their playing days were over. But of course, this was modern football, so players more than likely didn't really need this kind of money, not around this time anyway. So Quinn had decided that he was going to divide the financial proceeds of his testimonial between the two hospitals, the Royal Infirmary in Sunderland and Our Ladies for Sick Children in Crumlin in his hometown of Dublin, which would actually lead to an honorary MBE for Quinn in the Houses of Parliament and probably a sainthood, Martin, in Dublin.
Well, he was nicknamed Mother Teresa, wasn't he? By certain characters.
By certain name in Dunphy. But 2 days beforehand, and an ongoing theme of this World Cup, Mick is told that Roy is going to France for treatment and will not make the match. What a shock.
That's Roy Keane, that's Roy Keane you're talking about, yeah?
Yeah.
Not just a random Roy.
Oh, I think we all know who Roy is. There's only one Roy, thank God. Yes, shock horror. Roy Keane missing an Ireland match. He doesn't do friendlies, does he? Mick says in his book, if I release the news, Roy, and this is after the fact, by the way, if I release the news, Roy's absence will become a bigger story than the testimonial. Understatement of the year. Niall is still trying to sell tickets in his efforts to make £1 million for charity, and I'm not going to do anything to jeopardise that. I'm not going to do anything that would jeopardise ticket sales or my relationship with Roy or Manchester United. Anyway, the United doctor said they'd appreciate it if I kept quiet on the nature of the injury. And yeah, basically, Martin, Roy missing another game, for Ireland. Another friendly. Doesn't do friendlies, does he?
Yeah, I mean, this is strange when there's obviously Ireland to qualify for the World Cup. We're all getting the preparation end of the season. And Roy is obviously in kind of recuperation mode at the moment, managing this injury that we believe is there. And yeah, it's obviously a time, it's brilliant insight now. Obviously, this is why we love doing back in the day, because you can see, like, read Mick's kind of diary of the World Cup in a sense, wasn't it, afterwards, and how he's kind of feeling and thinking at the time. And obviously we got Roy's book as well to kind of analyze. So yeah, Roy's in preparation mode. There's obviously a lot of politics things going on in the background as well, but Mick's being very coy here and very clever. But yeah, well, it was for a good cause.
It was, wasn't it? It really was for a good cause. And yeah, there was Roy's absence again. Well, as I said on the top of the podcast, I do have the match day program. Let's have a look at the match day program, shall we, Martin? There's glowing tributes from everybody. We've got Milo Corcoran. We've got Bob Murray, who's the chairman of Sunderland FC. We have Peter Reid, the manager of Sunderland, of course. We have a thank you from Niall. We have lots of happy children who are all now going to be all okay. We got Jack Charlton, even Charlie Hurley, Paul Merson, Kevin Phillips, Adrian Heath, whoever he is, Paul McGrath, all the legends here, Don Howe, Pat Rice. Keep going through the program here. Mick another. Mick really loves Niall. It's 2 columns from Mick here. We got Kevin Moore, Dennis Irwin. For me, the best Irish player to come from Cork. He's in here. And yeah, I mean, it just goes on And on with tributes, glowing tributes. We have Robbie Keane, Damien Duff, all these people. Packy Bonner, Steve Staunton, George Graham, his manager at Arsenal. All with these wonderful tributes to Niall Quinn. And guess who isn't in it? Roy Keane. Now, do you want to tell us why your hero, Mr. Tell It As It Is, was absent from the matchday program?
Well, a lot of these
tell the
tributes,
story.
yeah, a lot of these tributes, David, as you know, are collated by kind of journalists, friends of the kind of testimonial committee in a sense, which I believe Cockle Durban, who's still at the FAO and I now, friend of the pod.
Nice man.
Nice lovely man. Very helpful with us at the podcast and supporters clubs and stuff. Well, basically, he, I think, was the kind of editor of preparer of the kind of contributions to the match program. And he is the person who, in his former role as a journalist, back in 1996, wrote an article encouraging the Lansdowne Road crowd to boo Roy Keane because he didn't care about Ireland. And obviously, the request would have been made from Niall Quinn's people, as it were, or Cockle Durban, to kind of contribute to the match program, which is a really interesting program. Actually, the tributes are fantastic. Actually, from memory, and I know you've got it there. But he declined to do it, Roy Keane, because he was just making a stand against Cockle Durban's involvement in it, which is sad to see in a sense that he couldn't kind of be the bigger person and think, it's Quinny's testimonial. We're going to raise some money
the bigger
here.
Person.
Well, you've got to raise some money, isn't it? And that's why he's just probably proving a point. And yeah, I mean, that's obviously the politics that go on in the background of Republic of Ireland football.
Here it is. Like Cathal Durban. This is a quote from Keane's book, the first one, As I See It. Cathal Durban was McCarthy's mate, the guy who urged the Lansdowne Road crowd to boo me because I didn't care about Ireland. I declined Niall's request. Petty. Very petty. Alex Ferguson had an ongoing feud with the BBC because I think there was an investigation into his sons, bungs, and that kind of stuff, wasn't there?
Yeah. Panorama.
And you refused to do any sort of cooperation.
It wasn't bungs, it was of agents and things.
Agents. Oh, so yeah.
Agents.
Anyway.
Allegedly, Jesus.
Allegedly, God. But he had this issue with the BBC. But who was it that was honoured? I think it was Ryan Giggs that was honoured for BBC Sports Personality of the Year. Or was someone like that? I can't remember who it was.
I'm not sure. Was it Bobby Robson or was it Bobby Robson or perhaps...
It could have been... Sorry, it could have been a
Charlton.
I think it was Bobby Charlton. I think it was Bobby Charlton.
Yeah, Gary Lineker kind of made it up with Fergie, didn't he? They approached and he,
he basically said, "I'll do that for Bobby."
Yeah,
but I'm still not going to cooperate with BBC. So that's an even more personal attack, in my opinion. To go after your sons like that. Now, whether they're guilty or not, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But Alex Ferguson can do that. But yeah, Roy Keane can't do this, and it's for a good cause. I just think personally, it's just very petty. Basically, it all came from in '96 because Roy just didn't bother showing up for Mick's testimonial. He went missing for Ireland's tour of America, where Roy was going to be made captain for the first time of Ireland. Finally came back. He was suspended, stripped of the captaincy, and he finally came back in late '96 in a 0-0 draw. He played centre half, and he got booed by some of the crowd. He was actually man of the match that day. But I think that's just petty, man. Come on, you can't defend that. Roy should have just done it. It's for children's charities, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, he should have just done it, but I think it just shows a simmering kind of undercurrent there between probably Mick, Cockle Durban, especially as well, that he's not been forgiven by Roy, and it's kind of the respect that Roy kind of has for his teammates in some ways, because Niall and him should have been, they've gone through it. They're professional footballers. They're both well respected. They should have really put everything aside. There should have been no conflict with Niall Quinn, I don't believe. So he should have done it for Niall and forget who's behind it. I mean, think about over the years, Roy Keane's probably signed shirts and things for people when he doesn't know where it's going, does he? He's probably going to people who slagged him off, and that's it. He's not going to necessarily know. And I just think it's very, very petty that he didn't do that.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen listening at home. Martin Prendergast actually saying something negative about Roy Keane. That is a collector's item. That's going to go with all my programs.
Soundbite. Listen to that before you go to bed every night.
I will actually, yeah. With the picture of Roy Keane wearing the poppy. But anyway, so we're going to move forward to the match of the 14th of May. So, as we said, it was at the Stadium of Light. Ireland battered Sunderland 3-0. Ireland were on a decent run of form, to be fair, at the time. The goal scorers were Mark Kennedy, David Connolly, and Kevin Kilban. The teams, Sunderland, we had Macho in goal, who subbed at half time for Ingham. We had Williams, Tome, Bjorkland. Wow, all the stars here. Gray, David Bellion, Thirlwell, McCann, and Julio Arca. Nopper and Quinn, who actually I think played for. Did he play for both teams?
Yeah,
he did, didn't he? And he was taken off for Phillips. He was then taken off for Medina. And then with Ireland, you had for the first half, you had Given and goal, Finnan, Breen, Cunningham, Staunton, Kilban, Carsley, Kinsella, Kennedy, and Morrison. And then for the second half, you had Kiley, Kelly, Dunn, O'Brien, Ian Hart, Damien Duff, Jason McAteer, Matt Holland, Mark Kennedy, who was taken off in the 83rd minute. We'll get to that shortly. Carsley came on for him, and you had Quinn coming on. Quinn started and then was substituted for Kilban on the 59th minute. Mick's reaction, he's asked. Oh, and also the referee was Dermot Gallagher. I didn't actually know that.
I think he's refereed Ireland twice, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. The Russia game and in Lansdowne Road and this one.
Yeah, I mean, look, the context of this game is, I know it's a testimonial, but it was also part of a preparation for the World Cup. So that's what Niall Quinn was selling the tickets on the back of that as well, which is obviously to honour him, as you know, obviously the money's going to charity and stuff, which I'm sure hasn't really made Niall Quinn massively popular with a load of pros, because they've all got to kind of set the precedent, didn't it? That, you know, you're now giving away a portion of the money. And you don't see testimonials as much now, unless they do have a charity angle. They still do them though, which is a bit strange. I don't mind them, to be honest, at lower league kind of levels where someone's
not Premier League level.
The Premier League's a bit ridiculous. And Celtic, I think, is the last one I can kind of remember. Scott Brown doing it against Republic of Ireland. So that's an interesting kind of thing to consider. But this was also preparation for Mick. He'd named his squad, hadn't he, the week before, and he was trying people out here, and you know, we're going to see what happened from that.
We'll just talk very quickly, Mick, about Roy afterwards. I didn't want to get wrapped up in the incidentals about him. If he turns up on Wednesday and plays on the 1st of June, then that's fine by me. Oh, Mick. Oh, bless you. Probably the most immediate story, I suppose, other than Roy, to come out of this was Mark Kennedy. He had to pull out because he was injured late on in that game. He was taken off in the 83rd minute. It was actually his 26th birthday as well. But he had to leave because of a groin injury that he sort of re-aggravated. And young 21-year-old Stephen Reid was put in instead of him. Here's what Reid had to say about it. I left my house at 8:30 and was 15 minutes into the journey when I checked my mobile for messages. He also says that there was one from Mick McCarthy. He just said that Mark Kennedy wasn't going to be fit and I could come over to Dublin for the game tomorrow night, or could I come over? We turned the car around. My brother was driving and went back home. My girlfriend Kathleen was gutted. Good Irish name there. But I told her we'd get away later in the summertime. There was only one thing I could do, and that was to head for Dublin. He said, yeah, he was actually on his way to the Barbados with his girlfriend when he said, sorry, love, I'm going to Korea and Japan instead. Very unlucky here for Mark Kennedy. But as we said in the last podcast, in my opinion, I know he scored in this game, you know, and it was literally an end of season training game. But there's no way Mark Kennedy should have been anywhere near that squad. Stephen Reid was on flying form, wasn't he, going into the World Cup?
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Like, and that's the kind of thing we referred to in the last one, that we thought that, you know, Stephen Reid was very unlucky not to go and could have gone as a kind of with the possible, you know, the potential he had and what he might offer differently and position wise and everything. So, and he went on to have a very good World Cup when he did contribute. So, yeah, it's a sad one for Mark Kennedy, and it would have been a very tough call for Mick to make, you know, because of the close relationship they had to club football over the years. But, you know, fair play to him. I mean, again, a spoiler alert, but, you know, some people went to the World Cup and kind of got injured in preparation games and stayed on when they could have, you know, and what they did has never sat well with me, you know, saying that they're fit and then they weren't and then they got subbed. So that's a future episode, obviously, where I'll be a bit more vocal on that one. But
A friend of Roy Keane's, I take it,
yeah. We should put it in a book, perhaps. But I think, fair play to Mark Kennedy, because it must be massively disappointing. And yeah, he's 26. He's had a few injury problems and stuff, but he's got to be thinking it's probably one of the last opportunities as well for him to go to a World Cup. And
it was.
It must have been temptation for him to say, I'm all right.
This is what Mick had to say on it. Literally to the point you alluded to there. It's a blow for Mark and a blow for me, because he was one of the selections in my squad. But he wasn't right. I could see that last night, even though he scored one goal and made another. I asked him after the game to give it careful consideration, and to his eternal credit, he was honest with me and with himself, because that was a big decision to come and say, I'm not right. He deserves a lot of credit for that. I told him he had to give me a guarantee that he could perform to 100% if I needed him in a game, and I think quite clearly he didn't believe he could do that. Yeah, as you said there, I mean, certain players that did travel weren't 100% right. And it's kind of funny, actually, when you think about it. Like, Nick on the last episode asked the question, didn't he? Would Mark Kennedy have played? I don't think he would have. I think, to be honest with you, he probably was just there. Maybe he probably would have got a few minutes, but I don't think he would have started. And I think Stephen Reid really only got into it because of injuries to said player that you don't want to mention just yet.
Yeah, it's a little bit of luck for Mick, really, in the sense that this happened then, because he could call him up. And, the versatility of Stephen Reid, as we saw, was definitely there. And, a young, ambitious player, like, going to the World Cup a little bit like McAteer had done and Kelly had done and Bab had done in 94. So, what an opportunity it was for him to come through and go to that World Cup. And, yeah, it's sad for Mark Kennedy, but that is football, and that can happen. And, Quinny missed out on World Cups previously. So he would have been an older statesman, kind of be able to know how that works and advise people. They probably told Mark Kennedy, look, you'll have other opportunities. But sadly for him, it wasn't to be.
Mick finishes up there with basically saying that I've not spoken to Roy, because they're not too sure whether, Roy will show up, because it is a friendly, isn't it? And that's against Nigeria, on the 16th of May, their final game the day before they actually fly to Saipan. But he goes, I've not yet spoken to Roy because he's only just arrived. And when I do, I shall make my decision. But as far as I'm aware, he is fine. This is on, will Roy lead the team out against Nigeria, which he did, to be fair. Ireland, what did you say?
No, sorry, I inhaled. Sorry.
There's no breathing allowed in this
I was going to come in and say that. I think this shows, though, where the relationship between Mick and Roy is simmering, because it doesn't seem to be in everything Mick says at this time. And I know he's saying it afterwards in his book. It just seems there's no actually direct contact with him.
That's
true. There seems to be intermediaries between it. Like, I've not heard, or I don't know. And that isn't boding well. Well, it didn't bode well, did it, for their relationship?
And the team.
Like, how come he doesn't know? And,
how can you go
into the World Cup not knowing if your captain's going to be there? I mean, it wouldn't be allowed to happen now.
No, and your team and the team doctor telling him at the top of the podcast, not Roy himself.
Yeah.
Because Roy couldn't be, after what happened in 96, when Roy just didn't bother telling him, I'm not coming to your testimonial. Yeah, no, that's a very good point there, Martin. You could just see, when you look back here, you go, there was no way he was going to make it through that World Cup with Mick. You could see the hatred for Mick. Maybe hate is a strong word, but you could just see the complete lack of respect, couldn't you? This guy just did not respect Mick whatsoever, and that must be very difficult for someone like Mick. For any manager, when you got a player, he's your best player, one of the best players in the world at the time, and he doesn't like you, doesn't respect you, and he's so aloof with you, and he disses you in public. He probably disses you in private. There's the stories where it was in Niall Quinn's autobiography, which was released later on this year, which is a brilliant book, by the way. He says, like, there was an incident where Roy was having a row with one of his mates, a drunken row, outside of Mick's dressing room. Mick opened his door. It's like, what's going on there? And he basically tells him to fuck off.
Yeah.
And Mick just looks at him, weighs it up in his head, and just closes the door and goes, all right.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard stories over the years of how Roy was in camp and stuff, and when he had his challenges with drinking and stuff like that, and a volatile character. And yeah, we've heard about, even kicking off with the Holland, the Holland preparation of, do you think Hasselbank's eating fucking sandwiches and pizza and shit like that? He had particular standards, as we've alluded to before on previous podcasts, but Mick let so much stuff go because he
He needed them.
I think he needed him, and that's the sad thing about it, really. That it was never massive characters in a sense, but Mick, I feel not sympathy for him, but it's more that Mick put his own feelings aside and didn't clash openly with him, and it was just accepted by the squad as well. That's just Roy, and that would piss me off a lot. Like, as you know, I love Roy, right, as a player and stuff, but that would piss me off that was there. But you know, you kind of have to put that aside and think, well, what a great player he was on the pitch and what he did. But it annoys me now looking back that was ever tolerated. Like, I can see that now. And you know, egos in football now, and Roy is the one who will often question and call out players. I think he often says you can behave like that if you're doing it on the pitch. He often says that about players, and he did, to be fair. That's the thing.
But and just to go back to the cheese sandwiches, because that is one you always hear. Actually, the cheese sandwiches, Ray Tracy came out in response to that and said, actually, no, they had everything he wanted. He just came down late. He didn't eat with the team, and he came down late, and there was no food waiting for him. And then someone said that to him, like, well, if you had to come down with the team. So there you go, that more aloof behaviour. Roy didn't want to sit with his teammates. Apparently, the only one he got on with was Stephen Carr, because he had the same mindset. Stephen Carr was one of the top, as we said the last episode, one of the top fullbacks in Europe at the time, and just which seems to happen with our fullbacks. If you've ever noticed, Jim Beglin, Mark Lawrenson, Stephen Carr, Seamus Coleman, they seem to get an injury at the wrong time, don't they? Anyway, Martin, thank you for that. We're going to leave it there. Thank you for listening at home. If you enjoyed what you heard, we hope you did. You can get more over at the greenmachinepodcast.com, greenmachinepodcast.com. You can also give us a review, give us a follow, give us a like on our YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you want to support the podcast, please support us. You can head over to our shop at thegreenmachinepodcast.com/shop. That's /shop. And you can buy our shirts, £40 or €45. Free delivery anywhere in the world, and you can buy a lovely sticker and badge collection as well. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. We're going to catch you on the next one.